Let me tell you a secret no employee knows or understands. Your boss is anxious about you not being promoted just as you are, maybe even more. Yes, I've said more. I know it sounds odd, but it's true. Don't kill the messenger. I'm just giving you the facts nobody else will. How do I know? Well, 23 years of working with bosses just like yours and seeing things from their point of view. This is how. So in this two-part video, I will A, prove it to you, and B, show you how you can use it to your advantage. So here it is. After deciding against you with a promotion or pay raise or both, your boss dreads no less, the moment of passing you in the hall, having to look you in the eye and make small talk, or worse, from his perspective, the moment you will look him in the eye and ask why. Why not me? For crying out loud, how could you pick that loser over me? Of course he'd say it differently, but that would be the gist of it. And when you do, he knows he will have to come up with an answer. So here are the scenarios your boss is running frantically in his head that cause his anxiety over you. He could either tell you the truth, which will probably deflate your motivation and performance, or he could brush you off with some made-up, feel-good, kumbaya bullshit that will appease you so that you can all go back to business as usual. However, both options are dreadful to him. Literally dreadful. How so? Well, the first option, where he tells you the truth on why he chose to give that promotion or pay raise or both to that other guy, not you, is dreadful to your boss two ways. Firstly, on a personal level, it is very hard to look someone in the eye and tell them, meaning you, the unpleasant truth about themselves, meaning you again, especially when it is bound to make the relationship awkward at best and straight out acrimonious at worst. Secondly, on a professional level, when your motivation and performance go down, this reflects negatively on your boss. Not one, not two, but three ways this happens. First, in his everyday managerial duties, having to deal with you. And who wants to deal with a disgruntled worker? Then, so it's the second way, there's the team to deal with. We all know the dynamics within a team are always complex enough as it is. But it gets even more complex when one member, that would be you, is not pulling his weight. And you're not pulling your weight because you were told the truth, which you didn't like, which deflated your motivation and performance, which is exactly as your boss suspected and feared. And then all of that, in turn, will reflect negatively on your boss in a third way, probably the most damaging to him, the way his superiors see him. So he is truly between a rock and a hard place if he tells you the truth. The second option your boss is frantically considering, where he bullshits you into appeasement and a business as usual relationship, is also dreadful to him. Because firstly, it is difficult to look someone in the eye and lie to them, meaning you, just as it is telling them the truth. Secondly, it is especially hard if the employee, meaning you, does not buy the lies and keep probing further on the why. The more you probe, the more your boss will weave an even more tangled web of lies than he already has. And thirdly, even if he manages to somehow appease you, he knows his tangled web of BS will 100% come back to bite him. When? When the next opportunity presents itself for a promotion or a pay raise or both. Why? Because when that happens, you will be assuming it's in the bag, your bag, based on this cockamamie talk he's had with you. So either way, a dreadful catch-22, which is exactly why your boss is totally anxious about you not getting that promotion or pay raise or both, just as you are, maybe even more. QED, I rest my case. Now remember, these are all scenarios your boss is frantically running in his head, which is the reason for his dread of you. Indeed, in his mind, you're the Dread Pirate Roberts, no less. And wouldn't you have loved to be Wesley and win the Princess Bride? Alas, my friend, I've prepared a very different role for you today from an entirely different movie, yet as remarkable. Not as alluring perhaps, but much more practical for your predicament, trust me. You will be, wait for it, Dorothy, all lost and confused, thinking her destiny depends on the whim of the all-powerful Wizard of Oz. And I will be your little doggy Toto, pulling back the curtain, exposing all the smoke and mirrors behind your boss's Wizard of Oz performance of confidence and being in control. And what you'll find will blow your mind, because you'll realize you've always had the power to go back to Kansas. And that will make you look at your current conundrum in a whole new way you never thought possible. Sounds interesting? Stick around. Hi, I'm the Boss Problem Buster, founder of the Pay Raise Commando. We train passed-over corporate professionals like you to get that pay raise or promotion you deserve, so that you can finally kill your Monday blues and bring your inner joy back, which is the best part about my job and the goal of this channel. Kill your Monday blues and bring your inner joy back. In our previous masterclass, we've broken down the 4 crucial don'ts after being passed over for a promotion and or a pay raise. I'll link it in the description. And now it's time for the crucial do's. What to do so that you can have the full picture of both the don'ts and the do's, and so that you can, with time, completely turn around your current disappointment into future success. And I have so many great insights and tips to share with you, things you probably don't normally hear, so the do's will be broken into 2 parts. In this first part, I will drill down deep into your boss's psychology after having passed you over. Turns out it has a huge impact on him, which is something I also have never heard anybody else speak of or even acknowledge, let alone understand how it plays in your favor in a surprising, counterintuitive way, which we'll cover today. And in the second part, I'll show you how you can actually, practically, use this newfound understanding of your boss's psychology to your advantage, because you absolutely can. Okay, let's get going. We have plenty to cover. The number 1 do, which is the focus of this part, is indeed understand your boss's psychology and how it can work to your advantage. Now, if you're like most employees, Dorothy, wink wink, I can't wink, so I have to say, you tend to forget that your boss is not as omnipotent as he seems to be, much like the all-powerful Wizard of Oz. If you pull back the curtain, as I'm now doing, remember I'm your little doggy Toto, you find out that it's just some guy pulling on some levers and often quite clueless as to what to do in the face of direct conflict. Just like when Dorothy confronts the wizard, and as you may confront your boss with the why not me question that he so dreads, as we've seen before. This might seem confusing or oxymoronic, but it's not. 2 things can be true at the same time. Your boss did indeed have the power to decide against you regarding that promotion and or pay raise. So in that respect, he was all-powerful, but he himself is constantly subject to a complex matrix of interpersonal and political dynamics, both within his department and outside of it, with peers and superiors. A crucial part of this matrix is the immense psychological power that a problematic or a rogue or a harder to control employee have over him, as they do any boss. I've seen it time and time again, to the point where you really come to wonder, who's the real boss here? Just like that 80s sitcom, Tony was the one in control in more cases than one, not his boss. Simply put, the more rogue an employee is, the more the boss is willing to do to appease that employee, just so that he himself can have some peace and quiet. By the way, let me go off on a tangent here for a second. If you're wondering why I refer to your boss and others as he, it's just time consuming and annoying to keep saying he or she, and I'm sick of using the PC they because it makes for ridiculous sentences which completely defy basic syntax and grammar, so I'm going with a he. And if I don't forget, next time I'll go with a she, so we'll alternate between the two. Fair enough? It's crazy that it even needs to be addressed, but these are the times we live in, and I just don't want that to distract anyone from the issue at hand. So let's all just keep our eyes on the ball here, which is your boss's psychology, whatever gender he, she, they may be. So as I've said, the more rogue an employee is, the more the boss is willing to do to appease that employee, just for his own personal peace and quiet. This is the paradox nobody understands or pays attention to, which is why we need this long form drill down. You may think this is counterintuitive, but it actually makes perfect sense. The only reason why it might seem counterintuitive is your innate but false assumption that your boss is both capable and willing to confront whomever is necessary in order to assert his leadership and to make that employee compliant and easier to manage, especially someone like you who is in his own department and under his direct supervision. You would think that because that is what he is paid to do, among other things. But this is not the case most of the time. Most bosses, especially mid-management, for sure lower management, but you would be surprised how often this is true for top management as well. Anyway, the point is most of them would be willing to put up with a lot, and I mean a lot, just to avoid confrontation of any sort. There is a much higher chance for most bosses to be either wimps or passive aggressive rather than true leaders with everything that entails or should entail. And don't be fooled by all the leadership programs they attend. Leadership is just an overused and misused term for what is otherwise mostly a bureaucratic, administrative, cog in the system mentality that is needed to perform well in most big organizations. Well, leadership and, of course, empowerment, which is the most prostitutionalized term ever. But we'll address that one another time. Don't even get me started on that. So from now on, I'll use management rather than leadership. It's just a more accurate term in the context that we're talking about. Now, management is akin to parenthood with all the obvious differences, and your boss's dread of you after having passed you over, is very much akin to parents' reaction to unruly children. Think of a family where one kid is a good boy and the other is a bad boy. The parents' energy, focus, and intent will naturally be directed towards dealing with a bad boy, with the result of neglecting the good boy. This means at first trying to educate him, then disciplining him more and more, but as time goes by, if his rambunctious behavior is still intact, their energy will dwindle and they will do anything to avoid confrontation with that child, to the point of laxing their demands on him in terms of house rules, chores, and general behavior, even at the expense of their parental values. So for example, their parental educational value may be, in terms of behavior, to insist the boy addresses adults politely, both at home and at school, which is a great educational value to show respect. But in practice, they would look the other way when the bad boy is being disrespectful to them or to uncles and aunts and teachers, just out of exhaustion and fear of turning yet another mundane situation into a full-blown tantrum. And anybody who's ever dealt with kids knows exactly what I'm talking about. So now the whole family dynamics is flipped, a complete 180. Not only is the bad boy catered to and constantly appeased by his parents, but also the good boy is getting all the discipline. Furthermore, the parents' nerves are so frayed at this point that the good boy is being disciplined for every minor infringement that would have otherwise gone either not noticed or noticed but not retaliated. So the good boy is being disciplined even if he doesn't deserve it, and when he does deserve it, to a harsher degree than his behavior warrants. It's all topsy-turvy. And if you're into a Freudian take on it, one might suggest that the parents are much harsher with a good boy as an overcompensation for their failure with a bad boy, and as a means of channeling their own growing frustration and hostility. Keep this in mind. It will relate back to your boss later on. Now, it may seem that we've digressed there, but no, let me assure you this is right on topic, because this is the professional and the political and personal and psychological context your boss is functioning in. And if you want to get ahead in an office that he's running, you need to understand it thoroughly. Plus, I did promise you a deep drill down into your boss's psychology, and that's exactly what we're doing. So in this family analogy, the parents are obviously the boss, but you might be wondering which of the kids you are. Are you the bad boy or the good boy? This will become clear later on, so hang in there. It will totally be worth it, I promise. So to wrap up this example, the most important and pertinent to your situation point here is understanding why and how this unfair and completely upside down dynamics are possible. The answer is quite sobering, if not completely depressing, if you stop to think about it. It is possible, listen to this, it is possible only because the parents know, drum roll, that the good boy will comply. The disciplinary action will go uncontested, even if somewhat protested. In other words, the good boy gets the shorter end of the stick just because his parents do not fear a retaliation from him. So the paradox is, if you're a good boy, in the sense that you're not feared, you lose. A bit of a dramatic pause here is warranted. Now, does it mean you need to be uncontrollable, impossible to deal with, unpleasant, an a-hole? Of course not, God no. It does mean, however, that being too vanilla will get you tossed aside too easily every time, for sure. Vanilla doesn't make the cut. You should mix in some stronger flavors to create a more robust office persona. And obviously, you need to have a level of sophistication here in order to do it right. It's all about subtleties and degrees of subtleties. I'll address that more in the next part. Also, there's a huge caveat that comes with all that. So please listen carefully, like that 60s song, Don't Let Me Be Misunderstood. Do not twist this into some cop-out as to why you actually lost the promotion or pay raise or both. Oh, poor me, I'm just too good of a person, so they step all over me. Weep, weep. The world is just so cruel and unfair. Well, of course it is. We all know that, but that's irrelevant. And as I said in the previous masterclass, this workplace, the one you're in, this is the sandbox you chose to play in. So you need to figure out the rules of how to win in it, or get out and find another sandbox to play in. one with rules you like better, and I would applaud you for such a move as long as you do it smartly and help you as best I can to do this transition. But as long as you choose, I'm big on personal responsibility, as you can tell by now, as long as you choose to stay where you are, be it out of convenience or fear or whatever it is, I don't want to hear any bitching about how supposedly unfair your workplace is. Okay, time to put everything together. Your boss is akin to those parents with the good boy and the bad boy. The good boy, let's now call him a good employee because we want to apply the analogy to your workplace reality. So the good employee is good from the boss's perspective, which is the whole point of this whole masterclass. He is good in the sense that the boss does not dread him and does not expect any overt objection or any sort of retaliation from him, the good employee, in terms of damaging the work in any way in reaction to the boss's decision. And that lack of dread is true even when the boss's decision is to pass over said good employee for a promotion or a pay raise or both. The flip side is that the boss does dread the bad boy. Let's now call him a bad employee. He dreads him in regards to any possible reaction to every move the boss makes as his boss. Will there be a tantrum? Will there be a delay in deadlines? Will bad employee incite others in the team against the boss? Which brings us full circle to where we started. The different scenarios your boss is frantically running in his head because he does not know whether you're going to be a good employee or a bad one after being passed over by him in terms of how subdued or vocal your reaction would be, how implicit or explicit your disappointment will be expressed, and whether you would keep it between yourself and him, the boss, or try to drag as many people in the team in as possible. And because he does not know which of those scenarios you're going to play out, he dreads you and has anxiety over you not being promoted by him, just like you do, maybe even more. So once again, QED. Furthermore, this is why your boss, as any other boss to be fair, will always, listen closely, he will always take the good boy / employee for granted, trusting that that front is secure for him while constantly trying to appease the bad boy / employee in order to divert himself from any potential conflict that is always on the horizon with the bad boy / employee in his team. And actually, if you stop to think about it, you'll see this paradox is true for every facet of life, not just work, relationships, family, friends, the lot. So, Dorothy, now that your little doggy Toto has pulled back the curtain on your boss's psychology, just as promised, you understand how and why your boss is much more vulnerable than you might have originally thought him to be. So, not the all-powerful Wizard of Oz, but just some guy pulling on some levers, quite clueless as to what to do in the face of direct or even a potential conflict. Indeed, as you are going through your 5 stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, as the famous psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross postulated, your boss is going through 5 stages of his own, and here they are as per my observations over the years. We've actually already touched on most of them, but let me just wrap it up nicely for you. The first stage is anxiety. This is true especially if you were indeed a valid contender for that promotion or pay raise or both. The more valid you were, the more anxiety your boss experiences at the time leading into the decision while making it, which is, by the way, he probably would have liked not to fall on his shoulders at all, and right after making the decision to pass you over. And it's easy to understand why. The closer the race was, the more difficult it was for your boss to choose. Which of course begs the question, what was the tipping point against you? If indeed it was a close call, or if it turned out it wasn't a close call, why wasn't it so? And worse yet, why did you think it was when it wasn't? Many heavy issues we need to seriously drill down into in the future, as we most definitely will. I'm actually writing a book about it, there's so much to say. But for now, let's go on with the 5 stages that your boss goes through after having passed you over. Number 2 is monitoring. This is a highly alert and tense time for your boss as he carefully observes your reaction and its influence on everybody else's within the team, especially monitoring the tension, either explicit or implicit, that is bound to exist between you and the one who got your promotion, plus the whole office political dynamics as a result of that. All that while wishing you would either curb your emotions as much as possible, or that if you do express your disappointment explicitly, that it will be manageable and not distract the team too much from its needed performance. And now the road bifurcates. If it turns out that you are indeed subdued, whether truly subdued or just passive-aggressively so is another matter, but at this point your poor boss will gladly take any form of subdued. So if you're subdued, and if the impact on the political and professional and interpersonal dynamics within the team is minimal, then the next 3 stages he would go through to complete his cycle of 5 are what I call the 3 R's. Relief, reassurance of his decision not to promote you but that other guy, and resumption of business as usual. This is what your boss hopes happen. In other words, this would happen if you turn up to be a good boy / employee. However, if you're not as subdued in your reaction to being passed over as your boss would have hoped, then he goes through a totally different set of 3 steps. These would be stress, wondering how difficult is it going to be, how long will it last, how will it affect the team's deliverables, then appeasing, working out a way to give you something as a consolation prize, and lastly, containing, lowering the flames enough so that he will have bought himself some more time to find another opportunity for you as a compensation for having failed you the first time. In other words, this would happen if you turn up to be a bad boy / employee. So now that you know, as promised, I always keep my word, which do you prefer to be? The good boy / employee or the bad boy / employee? I think this is a good cliffhanger to stop at. Maybe not as good as Who Shot JR, but close enough. Join me next time to find out the rest of the do's, what to do after being passed over for a promotion or pay raise or both. And as always, if you want these masterclasses to keep coming, you really must subscribe, hit the notification bell, hit the like, or I'm doomed. YouTube will exile me to an eternal oblivion. So just say no, no, no. And now go back to work. Seriously, I can't help you get that promotion or pay raise if you don't actually do the job.